Alright, response video to a Professor Anton and friend video. I can't remember her name, but anyway. Wife. Yeah. So, the guilt thing again, at least they did deal with the issue that there's a difference between guilt and shame, but they really didn't get to the core of what makes real guilt, which is, Professor Anton touched on it. It's a internal recognition. Okay, it's like you have to have something called integrity or honor. You have to be invested, in a sense, into a standard of what acceptable is. So we're just talking about what the appropriate standard for acceptable is as a human, a performance standard. So guilt is sort of like, on the ethical level, the same kind of thing that like maybe an athlete would have. He has a performance standard. He can either accept being a gold medalist or a silver medalist or just an amateur, but he is going to feel good or bad based on whether or not he meets his standard that he's applied or created for himself in terms of performance. And failure would be the example, where he doesn't feel guilty when you fail at a athletic event. You feel failure. You feel a different kind of thing, but it's the same kind of mechanism as guilt. It's just an acknowledgement of a disappointment, and it just comes in a different form because of the fact that it's tied to your integrity and your honor when you do the guilt thing. So it's something you've already invested in, which is this idea, this ego. It gets to your ego in a different way. Let's just put it that way. So it's hard to explain the difference between one emotion and another emotion, besides the fact that they have a different flavor, and it's very difficult to explain flavor. But we can understand that it's in a class of flavors, So whether it's chicken or roast beef, we can say it's in the class meat, that kind of thing. All right, so what we're really talking about is what should be the standard. What's a standard that we can mock, and what's a standard that we can honor or respect. And so some people are going to say, well, okay, I'll bring up the grenade jumper, because this is a perfect example that kind of wipes out all this side conversation about all this crap where you're supposed to, it's okay to be a little bit selfish, so you got to take care of yourself so you can help more people. And that's not the argument here. We're talking about optimum performance. We're talking about your optimum productivity. And the fact is that a grenade jumper, somebody who jumps on the grenade to save his buddies, is likely, in all probability, in true fact, going to be highly productive, more productive than he can be by surviving. The odds of him curing cancer aren't that high, and here he has an equation where he can save people who might cure cancer. So it's that kind of potential benefit. And again, we always have to base this on probabilities, so we can't explicitly know in every circumstance what the right thing to do is absolutely. Right thing is the wrong word to use. What will produce the optimum outcome? We can't know absolutely. We can just know probabilistic equations, and that's all there is. And so we can't say things absolutely, but we do know that there are circumstances that will get you somewhere and circumstances that will get you nowhere. If you put $5 worth of gas in the car and you have to drive 700 miles, you're not going to make it. It's not going to work. There are, it's like the war. Okay, if your idea of what a soldier does is stay in bed and hide under the covers, you're not going to likely win the war that way. The war winning is going to require something more than that. And I'm going to argue that having a decent thing, a thing that's going to be called a decent civilization, cannot happen in an atmosphere where people will compromise none of their self-interest. That's impossible. They want all the freedom, no responsibilities, and that won't work. It's just impossible. There has to be sacrifices. There has to be concessions. And period. It's $5 worth of gas for a 700-mile trip. It's just not going to happen if you're not going to do more than that. You have to. This won't add up. And so again, I'm just going to argue. I don't think it's a complex statement to make. That there is, for every individual, a maximum trail to walk, where I would take all the choices that exist, all the possibilities. I turn just the right way at just the right time. I move over here. I do this. I navigate the maze in a perfect way. And we all have that possibility from this moment on in our life. There's a maximum way for us to walk through our life to increase, anyway, by my values, to minimize the amount of harm we do, or that we, the harm that we create, and minimize the amount that we prevent. I mean, maximize the amount prevented, minimize the amount created. And that, just from the negative point of view, there's a maximum amount of elevation we can do to the world in terms of creating a world where the overall quality of the sentience experience is more increased than decreased. And that's our best potential realized, is if we can find that path. That's our ultimate productivity. And everything else is something less than that. And it's certainly going to be compromised by how much we apply these stupid notions of self-interest in terms of making up some kind of story about how, well, I got to take care of myself first. I can't be fantastic if I don't do this for myself. I mean, this bullshitisms that are used to justify turning your back, on the front line and saying, no, I'm so much more useful if I cook food for everybody, or I'm really useful if I sit home and pray for you all. Yeah, that's how I can be my most useful to you. And that we can mock, right? It's obvious that that's not something said or done out of any real understanding that there's a realistic chance that that's going to make the model work out. It's obviously just coming out of a personal self-interest to avoid what winning requires. All right. So, they threw in this, these little digs at me. Maybe I'll play the end where Professor Anton takes some kind of shot. And in the same kind of mode, like somehow I have to cure cancer. Somehow I have to do something. Like I have to lose an arm in this cause somehow before I have rights to talk. And it's so funny coming from teachers. Teachers are notorious, those who can't teach, that kind of line. Like somehow a philosophy uttered on the internet must come with some sort of, I have to have honor badges on my chest for me to utter my authoritative descriptions of reality. What a pile of crap this is. I bet if I have a Nobel Prize, he won't respect it. I bet if I get a Nobel Prize, he still won't respect me. I'll bet you. So it's really, this idea that I have to credential myself is just such a pack of shit. Hey pups, hey, how you doing? So yeah, cheap shottery, typical. But anyway, so what is the ultimate point there? Yeah, but this idea that I'm just on the internet, telling people how they ought to behave, and that's, of course there's an ought in it, just because I'm describing a reality. And the truth of the matter is that it ain't going to get fixed unless we fix it. Duh. That's my fault. It's my fault that we're obviously obviously we're doing it wrong, and it's my fault that it's wrong, right? Somehow, and if I explain that, oh, you know what we're doing isn't working, oh, now I have to somehow, again, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to demonstrate my sacrifice to the cause? And that's this kind of bullshit. I'm explaining to you how, look, you change this, you fix that, you move that, and you can mitigate against a huge amount of this suffering. So this idea that I haven't offered realistic solutions to things like our democracy and the writing of a safe and cautious living will for the right to die, and lots of other mechanisms where I've suggested solutions that I think are rock solid solutions. So this is just kind of bullshit. I'm just sitting here ragging on others because I can't do. Yeah, I can't change the world from my fucking goddamn living room, from my hovel. That's right. I have to do it by convincing you fucktards that we can change the world. Period. And clearly you don't want to hear that, because now I'm imposing guilt on you and responsibility, and you don't want to hear about any responsibility to give up your lifestyle, to give up any aspect of your freedom or liberty for the sake of the many. You're just denying the Spock logic, and you're denying the nature of the beast, and you want to keep pretending that we're just going to evolve into better people eventually, someday, maybe. It ain't going to happen that way. It's going to happen because people like me, someone like me, makes arguments to your conscience, and you get it and say, oh, I get it now. Nothing good is going to happen if I keep acting like a baboon. So anyway, certainly I'll give Professor Anton credit for acknowledging that intelligence has something to do with your capacity to recognize responsibility. He didn't say exactly that, but that's what it is. You have to be knowledgeable of how the game works to know when you're playing it wrong. And so most real good guilt is only going to come to people who have some recognition of what was at stake, what the game is for, what the implications of actions are. You really have to have some kind of knowledge of that to be able to create a good amount of guilt. You have to know right from wrong. And knowing right from wrong is not always obvious. Again, you feed the starving person. It seems obvious that you're doing a good thing, but if you don't have knowledge of the fact that they're going to pick a goddamn baby out of that food, and that you're just going to create 2 starving people tomorrow, that ain't going to work. Pragmatically, or in terms of maximizing your productivity, it's going to be a failure. That's the failed path of doing good. You have to come up with a better path, maybe a win-win. You give them food, but you also bargain for no babies to be made out of it. All right. So let's see. There's not a real good word I did notice for the alternative to idealism. Because part of this argument is that I'm preaching too high a standard. Too idealistic. And what's the alternative? Again, why shouldn't we, if we have this idea that there is a perfect path, why shouldn't we at least try to find it? And I think we can do that by analysis. We certainly know where perfect is not going to be. I think you can know that much, that the straightest line between here and where I'm going is not going backwards. So this we can apply. How you doing? Hi. So we can apply some judgment and not be totally crippled in this effort to try to get the best we can out of our existence. And so not to acknowledge that that's all I'm advocating for is very unfair. I mean, I'm advocating to achieve your maximum performance. And depending on your circumstances, that might be jumping on a grenade. That might be giving everything you have, and it might not be. It might be saving it up until you're 85 years old and you all of a sudden discover some gene therapy that cures cancer. But we can't know those things, but we can know a big pile of these things in terms of probability. And that's all I've advocated for, is that we acknowledge the clear, decisively obvious probabilities. And and again, it does come down to some acknowledgement of the basic values. If you're going to keep pretending that your perception that that it would be great if the Red Sox win the World Series, if you're going to keep living based on these subjective definitions of value, rather than any understanding of a much bigger picture, a much bigger game we're playing, and a recognition that this nonsense you're invested in has no value, that the real value is in the animals you might step on every day, or in the people you ignore every day, that's where the real value is, then you don't have any much hope of achieving your productivity. If you think your kids are better than somebody else's kids, you're failing already. You failed the IQ test. And I think Mrs. Anton has a little bit of that in her. That ain't gonna work. That ain't logical. That ain't intelligent. We just gotta acknowledge that the rudimentary animal, the fundamental biology, is not the best of us. The best of us is in our knowledge, in our understanding. That's where anything that's great about human beings exists. So, enough of a video. I'm still really... Alright, Anton. Just to play some of this.
Of intelligence. And does intelligence... See, because Andy's been in this argument with Gary over... for Gary, there's this moral imperative to be, in some way, self-sacrificial. That you should feel guilt because guilt is some measure of your intelligence.
All right. Now, I've said it 4 million times, you shouldn't feel guilt. It's a stupid emotion. There's no point in feeling anything. I've always talked about what you think. And all I've talked about is the fact that there's an optimum model. Your brain isn't the only brain. Your kids aren't the only kids. It's just an argument against nepotism. It's an argument against nationalism. It's an argument against selfishism. All of these things are isms, okay? They're completely irrelevant to a rational, logical intelligence understanding of what is valuable. What is valuable is child. Your child, irrelevant. What is valuable is civilizations. What civilization is irrelevant. It's the people in it that matter. It's the people that matter. It's the sentience that matter. It's the creatures capable of having an experience that matters. That's the point, okay? I don't care what you feel about doing it. I just care that you do it, that you have some sort of rational imperative that says to you that is the ultimate objective. The long term is the only term, okay? The group, the mass of sentience around me is the only way I can evaluate my performance. How I swim in the sea of sentience determines whether I'm a good swimmer or not, and that's all that matters.
And he's going to say that it's a sign of a lack of intelligence to not feel guilt in some way.
Well, again, that's not what I'm going to say. I keep saying it over and over again. I don't care what you feel. If you want to waste time feeling guilty, go ahead. I'm saying all I want you to do is to acknowledge the fact that there's obligation, that there's responsibility, that you will... That your true performance is going to be based on not only what you do for this brain, but what you do for all brains.
that guilt and intelligence are related. And there's something very interesting in there about how is intelligence related to determinism.
Well, I think it sounds like for him, intelligence is related to emotional intelligence or relationship, that's part of what he's calling intelligent.
No, it isn't. So I don't even know what that is. What is that? I can't make the titles of the videos any clearer. Okay, intelligence good, psychology, emotional crap, all this bullshit, fucking fucktarded. I mean, is there somehow, is that unclear? Intelligence good, psychology fucktarded. How could you miss this?
And there are some people who separate intellect and reason, or intellect and emotion, but he's not in the way that he's talking.
Oh yeah. So what is that? So based on your paraphrase, so you didn't even watch one of my videos, and you're going to sit there and characterize what I'm doing or saying? Come on, let's be a little more professional than that.
I mean, I think at the ontological level, I think they are ultimately very related. Now, at the sociological level...
Well, quite obviously, I've also pointed out that you have to create some sort of internal motivating mechanism. There's no way. You have to be invested in honor codes and integrity and standards. You have to somehow turn them into your ego and invest in them. I'm just saying the emotional investment should be as minimal as possible. All you should expend is the minimum amount of grief, the minimum amount of guilt, the minimum amount of emotional experience that's necessary to get you to do the right thing. But you really shouldn't have to be starving for it. You should just understand it.
Well, they could be parceled out, and we could talk about, what we mean by intelligence and social intelligence and how you do on IQ tests, and none of that has anything to do with what we mean by guilt and wrongdoing.
Okay, exactly. So let's just move on. Let's go to the ending. I don't have much time on the camera, so let's just speed this up a little.
People that they're not doing it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to do with consistency, and I don't think anyone, it's sort of like, that's why you get let the person, cast the first stone who is without any wrongdoing. I mean, I think every person has to, and this is the point about it being ontological, I think all of us have to face being limited, making decisions within contingencies, within unforeseen, all kinds of obstacles that could come in, and I think there is a...
So he's just talking about excuse making, okay? And so, yeah, everybody's going to say that, yeah, you can't go beyond your limitations, okay? A man's got to know his limitations. Another great Clint Eastwood line, right? So, yeah, you got to know your limitations, but let's concede the fact that a lot of people will use excuses to get out of taking any responsibility or being as good as they could be. That's just a truth. Let's not ignore the fact that there's a huge personal incentive to evade responsibility. Social responsibility.
Sense in which we have to have great amounts of forgiveness on both ourselves and one another, but even there, it's balancing having moral standards between moral self-righteousness and self-loathing, right? I mean, there's some sort of balance there.
So there you go. Strike a balance.
Whoop-de-doo. That parade of moral self-righteousness is actually a sublimated form of guilt expiation. That is, the person's trying to expiate their own guilt from having...
Yeah, so that's what he's talking about me. And that's the part that's annoying.
Right. And then I'm like, get out of the room. Go get a staple. And, people laugh, but they get that message without me being a jerk. I mean, it's a way of trying to say, look, straighten up and fly right. Without being... It's just a different tactic.
It's the T.S. Eliot of, set your own lands in order first, and don't try to save people from drowning if you yourself can't swim. I think some people end up doing a parade of moral self-righteousness, and if it's partly overcompensating from their inability to get their own life in order, that parade of moral self-righteousness is actually a sublimated form of guilt expiation.
All right, so I missed it again. It's further back than I thought. Well, anyway, it doesn't really matter. But the point is, he's just implying that somehow I have to get my life in order, or I have to do this or do that. No, it's a philosophy, okay? I can do lots of oughting without ever doing any of it myself, okay? I mean, Albert Einstein doesn't have to exist in three-dimensional space to describe three-dimensional space. So we're just describing what the reality is. Whether I perform or not is irrelevant. It really is irrelevant to my capacity to describe what the standards are of being a good running horse, I could be a disabled horse. I could be a crippled horse. And I could give you an explanation of what it is to be a good trotter or a good this or a good that. All right? And we're talking about getting the best out of ourselves, period. So again, I don't know what standards I'm supposed to meet up to. You want to give me the list of my where I've not adequately performed to demonstrate my credentials or whatever this bullshit is. But anyway, that's just kind of irrelevant to the conversation. The conversation is about is nationalism right or wrong? Is nepotism right or wrong? Is selfishism right or wrong? And I'm going to say it's decidedly all wrong. Okay, the game is the whole game. I'm not saying you have to burn. I'm not saying everybody has to jump in a fire. I'm not saying everybody has to pour gasoline